Shabbat Shalom. Happy Sabbath. Again, we are thankful to know that we are the recipients of these sacred hours, in that Yah has asked us to meet with Him on this, a day that He has curtained off from the rest of the days and said, this is the day that I want to meet with my people. So we are thankful beyond words this morning for the privilege of being in His house. And so this morning we want to look at the subject, an affidavit of slavery, an authorized affidavit of slavery. Often when people look at slavery, they start from the 16th and 17th century, and I wonder why they do that when the Word of Yah is replete and gives us a more complete view and understanding of slavery. And so this morning we want to look at that. But for those of us who live in the shores of America, it seemed to us that because of the legs, the horns of American democracy, which are Protestantism and republicanism, they have become symmetrical to each other, church and state, wherein they are against the longitudinal axis of its objective. Because in the American Constitution, which is the very idea that all men are equal, they state that we have found that its gait, its walk, it's not the same as its talk. Therefore, we want to explore the idea of all men being equal in America within the context of an affidavit of slavery. As you know, an affidavit is a statement that is presented under oath and is assumed to be true. So in that regard, this morning, all I'm doing is taking the true statements that have been put forward by the apostles and by the prophets and present them to you compositely as an affidavit. That's the objective that I want to achieve this morning. And in so doing, I want you to turn with me to the book of Yoel, or Ecclesiastes, chapter 10, and we will dilate a little on verse 7. Ecclesiastes chapter 10 and verse 7. And the wise man Solomon here writes, I have seen servants on horses, and the princes walking as servants upon the earth. Servants on horseback, and the princes are walking. We need to understand what the writer here is actually saying to us. King Solomon here writes in the indicative mood. It's declarative, indicating that an action has been performed. And so, in all the cases of slavery that we have read of, whether in the scriptures or elsewhere, the torsion and the symmetry has been such that it has caused pain and derision to our people, to the bronze people, the black people of the earth. And we want to make sense of it so that we can understand the whole thing contextually outside of that which they have given us in the 16th and the 17th century. We want to look at that. We want to make sure that when we read the preamble of the American Constitution, we understand it within the context of the Word of Yah. Because we read what they say, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are all endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And perhaps we ought to ask ourselves this morning, how self-evident is this truth seen in the context of slavery, either here in America or in Britain? How self-evident is it that all men are created equal when the treatment dished out, men were lynched, whipped, and the asymmetry meted out to them in that the words spoken in the Constitution, they were not commensurate with the action or the policies of the government. We want to look at that. We want to examine why our people were transported from Israel to West Africa and then to the Americas and to Europe. We want to know that. And so we want to look at that. But we want to first look at what I call the incident of impudence. We want to look at that because I believe this is where it all begins. So come with me to the book of Bereshit, chapter 21. The book of Bereshit, that's Genesis. And we will read from verse 9. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, laughing. The bondwoman's son is laughing at the son of the promised woman. So she said to Abraham, cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of this slave woman shall not be heir with my son Ishtak or Isaac. And the thing was very displeasing to Abraham on account of his son. But Yahweh said to Abraham, be not displeased because of the boy and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you, for through Isaac, through Ishtak, through the promised son, shall your offspring be named. So from the very earliest stages of life, we see there is a distinction between the Ishmaelites and the children of promise, the children of Judah. We see it here. It's in the word. We see it. But slavery was such a vogue. It was such a vile estate of man. But it was a good thing for those who, so they thought, who brutalized black people, causing a visceral sense of foreboding to generation yet unborn. That's what slavery did. The treatment of the black man at that point of slavery ranges downward to the condition very little above the lower primates. Despite its ghastly nature, slavery was for a long time a matter of indifference between the state and also the church. And many have come to agree that the church was complicit in all of this. Because even the pilgrims who came here, who were running away from persecution themselves from the Catholic Church in Europe, when they came here, they did not see their brothers as and sisters as equal as the Constitution had declared unto them. And many of the black pilgrims who came, they were put in the back of the church to sit. And so this equal idea of the American system just doesn't measure up. It doesn't measure up. And in that kind of situation, we heard deceit from the pulpits, and we saw hatred meted out in the pews. And that was happening both in the Protestant churches and in the Catholic Church. And so slavery was a vile estate unto the black man. So therefore, we intend this morning to survey the unexpurgated historical character of slavery as an institution. Furthermore, we will examine the reason for the mass enslavement of Yah's dispersed Negroes to Africa, the logic, the method, vocabulary, and rationale of slavery, for many, even now, even today, remain incomprehensible. We just can't grasp it. And so we want to look into that. And as I indicated earlier, the struggle began at that moment of the impudence of incident, or the incident of impudence, when the bondwoman's son started to laugh at the promised seed, who is Yeshtak. We need to understand that. And so we are dealing with the mendacity of the slavers, the capacity that informed their audacity. It was such that which brought to the black man the atrocity. It was done without wisdom, no sagacity in it, what they did to us. And so the neutrality of the church allowed for the imposition of that immorality that persisted for 400 years. And so it became normality. And so the practicality that was exacted on humanity exposed the lethality and the brutality with intense velocity and leaves us in curiosity. So this morning, we want to look at that situation. We want to look at it. And so this affidavit is a sworn statement that I bring to you which declares that the information that I give you from the scripture is true. That's what an affidavit really is. And so turn with me to the book of Esther. Esther chapter 6. The word says that the king's servant said to him, Haman is there, standing in the court, and the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king asked him, what shall be done for the man whom the king delights to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, whom would the king delight to honor more than me? And Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delights to honor, let a royal robe be brought, which the king has worn, and a horse on which the king has ridden, which as a royal crest placed on his head. Then let the robe and the horse be delivered to the hand of the one of the king's most noble princes, that he may array the man whom the king delights to honor, then parade him on horseback through the city square and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. This passage here is laden with truth, the profundity of which perhaps we have not yet plumbed. And I want to use this to frame our study this morning as we look into the asymmetry, the unequal distribution of justice and of wealth during slavery and thereafter. We want to look at that. Because what we're seeing here is that Haman, who is the villain, believing that he was going to be put on horseback and treated like a royal, suddenly realized that the tables are turned on him, and it was being done to Mordecai, who was considered the villain. And so when Solomon writes that he saw servants on horseback, but kings walking on foot, perhaps he was speaking about his own father, because when Absalom decided that he wanted the throne and ran to get the throne, he was riding a horse, and David had to run to Mount Zion on barefoot. So when Solomon says, and he writes again, as I remind you, in the indicative mood, saying an action had been performed. But I want you to get in your mind, in the pineal gland this morning, what I'm really trying to get at is that this slavery that took place was that the real princes from Judah became the slaves that were walking on foot, while the villains, those who enslaved them, were the ones now riding on horsebacks. We've got to understand that. And so it is important that we look at the word that was earlier read in Luke chapter 21. Luke chapter 21, come with me there. Yeshua now is speaking, and in reference to what was going to take place in AD 70. He says, and when you shall see Jerusalem compassed with army, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst depart out, and let not them that are in the countries enter therein, for these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. So understand what is happening here. Yeshua recognized that the second temple is going to be destroyed, and he's giving a warning, and he's letting the people know that when you see Jerusalem is surrounded by armies, in this case, the Roman armies, and Titus is coming, he's saying, flee, flee, to preserve your life, flee. Even as Lot was told, flee for your life, and he went to Zor. The same thing is going to happen in the end time. But to contextualize what I'm saying is, we need to understand at the time that Yeshua spoke, the people in Judah were mostly people of color. They were black people. And that migration started even from the time of Jeremiah, when the people moved. Daniel was such a man. And the Hebrew boys, they were such people. They were people like me and like you. Despite what the scholars and the artistic impressions given to you in school and in churches, the word wants you to know that these people were you. The king, we will recall as we studied a couple of weeks ago, when we read in Daniel chapter 1, he wanted the servants to bring him young men who were from the king's seed of Israel. They were royalty. These were black men. Bring them to me so I may train them for 3 years. And the word says after 3 years, when he tested them, they were brighter, 10 times brighter than the Chaldeans. The word says that. These were Shemitic people. And so I want to make the point now that when we look at slavery, we must make the distinction between the Shemitic Negroes and the Hamitic blacks. Hear me? Let me say that again for emphasis. We must make the distinction between the Shemitic Negro, meaning they are not descendants of Ham, and make that distinction between those of Ham, the Africans, those who were born in Africa, different people. Different people. So when Yeshua gave this warning, the Negroes, Shemitic Negro, they migrated to Africa. They migrated to Benin, to Ghana. And Benin was one of that areas that was most populous for the slave trade. For Guinea, Nigeria, Togo, all those areas, the Shemitic Negroes migrated to Africa. And when they migrated to Africa, the African-born, the Hamitic ones, despised them. And it was the native Africans who collaborated with the Ishmaelites, the Arabs, and began selling the people, Shemitic people. Understand what I'm saying? The African did not sell their own people. They sold the Negroes that came from Israel. And they did that with the Arabs. And then the merchants and the ship owners, the Ashkenazi ship owners, and those from Europe turned it into the trade that we have now come to understand through the 16th and the 17th century. That's what happened. So when Yeshua gave the warning, they heeded it and went to Africa. In fact, when you read the history of Josephus, Flavius Josephus, a man who lived in that era in the first century, he wrote that over 1 million people migrated to Africa during that time. 1 million. And they went to West Africa. And if you look at the West African map of 1747, the Gold Coast map, it tells you the kingdom of Judah on the map. That's what it says. It says the kingdom of Judah. And by 1771, the same cartographers who drew up the map take away the kingdom of Judah, and the map did not exist again. Someone had gotten to them to tell them to take it off. These represent part of the history. So our Shemitic kinfolk, they migrated to Africa, to West Africa mostly, and so the native Africans despised them and sold them with the Arabs. And it became a commercial enterprise whereby the Ashkenazi ship owners turned it into an institution that now has become so painful to us. And so it was from West Africa that they were picked up and brought to the Americas, and brought to Brazil, brought to Liverpool, brought to Bristol, and other parts of Europe, Portugal, France, and all over the world. And so we became the dispersed people. I want you to understand that, so that you will understand when the scriptures make certain statements that you know who it's talking about. And so if you turn with me to Joel chapter 3, as was read earlier, Joel chapter 3, and we will take verse 5 and 6. It says, "Because ye have taken my silver and my gold, and have carried into your temples my goodly pleasant thing, the children also of Judah," that's us, "and the children of Jerusalem have ye sold unto the Javan." What are you saying? They sold us unto the Greeks. Who are the Greeks? The ones who committed and gave us democracy. He says, the children of Judah were sold to the Greeks, and that you might remove them far from their borders. You did. So Joel here is letting us know that our brethren were sold to the Greeks. But he's going to round them back up again. Now, we need to make the distinction, though, between us, because some may well say, well, how could that be? Because we now have a situation in the promised land, so to speak, where there are people there claiming to be who we are claiming to be. Or may I say, who the Bible declares us to be. We can have claims, but we've got to substantiate it from the word. Truth has to be logically consistent. It has to be empirically adequate. It has to be verifiable by the word. And it has to be existentially relevant to the times in which we live. It has to be. So I have just stated that the people who migrated to Africa during the time that Yeshua gave the warning, they were mostly people of color. And perhaps you may have difficulty believing that. So turn with me to the book of Genesis, chapter 10, and we will do our diligence from verse 1. Now, these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. That's what the word says. And guess who is writing here? This is Moses. I like to read from Moses because I know this is a man who took dictation from Yahweh on Mount Sinai. You don't get it any more real than that. This is genuine stuff. And he's telling us that the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, these are the people that repeopled the earth after the flood. And he goes on, the sons of Japheth, Gomer and Magog, and Madai and Javan. Did you get that? Javan, I just read that earlier. Javan, that's the Greeks. Are you with me? And Tubal and Meshach and Tyrus, and the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, and Repah and Togarmah. Verse 4, and the sons of Javan, Elisha, and Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. Then Moses go on. He said, all these lists of people here. And I don't want you to miss the point in verse 3 about Ashkenaz. Why? Because the majority of people claiming to be Jews today, they say they're Ashkenazi. I think it's about 92% of them say they're Jews. But Moses here said, by these were the hides of the Gentile. What did Moses say? Moses says, these people here we see in Genesis chapter 10, who are the descendants of Japheth, mostly Europeans. He says they are Gentiles. Then we have a dilemma, because we know the British, through Balfour, in 1948, took a bundle of people, a group of people from Europe, and brought them to the land of Israel and say, these are the Jews. That's what he said, that they are the Jews. And the world over has held to that belief, and few have questioned whether that is so or not. But I want you to reason for yourself, not to quarrel with anyone, but to look into this book here, from which I have opened up to your examination, or for your examination, so that you might ask yourself certain question as to whether or not the affidavit that you're getting this morning, how true it is. So come with me to the book of Stephanus or Zephaniah. Chapter 1, the word of Yahweh which came to Stephanus, the son of Cushi. The son of who? Cushi. The son of Gedaliah. Remember, Gedaliah was a governor of Judah after Nebuchadnezzar had taken the kingdom, well, had besieged the kingdom and had taken the children of Judah to Babylon. Gedaliah was a governor of Judah, meaning Gedaliah, right, is a black man. Wait, you say. Let's go over it again slowly, because this is really a fireside chat that we need to have this morning. the word of Yahweh, the word of whom? Yahweh, which came unto Zephaniah, the son of Cushi. Whether in Hebrew or in Greek, Cushi means black. He's the son of Cushi. So the prophet here who is writing is letting you know that he's black. And he's the son of Gedaliah. Gedaliah is the governor of Judah, the son of Amariah, the son of Ezekiah. Ezekiah is one of the good kings of Judah, tracing their roots all the way to the house of David. In the days of Josiah, the son of Ammon, the king of Judah. So the unexpurgated truth here is that this line of people, many of which were transported to Babylon during Jeremiah's time and subsequently to West Africa, they were black. Therefore, you know now that the people who Moses led out of Egypt into the promised land through the desert, they too were black. Because you would then have to ask yourself and provide yourself an answer as to why was it possible that Moses, if he was of a different color, could have hidden in Pharaoh's house and not be detected? You may well ask yourself, how was it that Yeshua himself was hiding in Egypt because Herod wanted to kill all the baby boys? And he was hiding among people who looked like him, but he was not detected. How? Of course, you may well ask yourself the same question about Joseph. He was in Egypt, prime minister, and he was among people that looked like him. But when his brothers came, if he was a different color, the Bible says they did not recognize who he was. Paul, the apostle, was mistaken as an Egyptian. How could that be? So now come with me to chapter 3 of Stephanus, and we're going to read verses 9 and 10, because I'm trying to cement this thing and to give you enough to take away, to do your own research, to do your own exegesis, so that you may come up with the right hermeneutics of what I'm saying. I want that to happen. So, verse 9 of chapter 3 of Stephanus, for then will I turn the people a pure language. What language? Hebrew. That they may call upon the name of Yahweh to serve him with one accord. Now, hold it there. We know that during the time of Abraham, the man who was ruling the world, the man who was king, was a man called Nimrod, who was the son of Cush. He was a black man. We know that. That's elementary to most of us. And Abraham's father worshipped other gods under his tutelage. We read that in Joshua chapter 24 and verse 2. So it's in the word. I'm just making a point. But we read that the building of the Tower of Babel, up until that point, the world had one language, Hebrew. That's what the word says. The world had one language, meaning that Nimrod spoke Hebrew, the king, the son of Cush, all of them. So when Yah says in verse 9 that I will turn the people to a new language, he's saying all the people of color and all those who accept Yeshua, I will give them again a new language. Not a new language, the old language. Because many of us today, we speak English. Some speak Spanish. Some speak other language. But up until the tower building, all of Africa, you better believe it, had one language. So English is a derivative of Babel. Are you with me? I know that many of us like our clip English, and we like the pronunciations, and we don't like a split infinitive, and we like the grammar correctly stated, and we like to speak in the proper mood. Are you with me? We like the indicative mood and so on, the presumptive mood and subjunctive and all that kind of mood. But the word said it was Hebrew. It was Hebrew. So verse 10 says, from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. From where? From beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my suppliant, even the daughter of my dispersed, shall bring mine offering. The Ethiopians are his dispersed. The Shemitic Negroes who migrated from Israel to Africa, he said, they are my dispersed. We need to understand another thing, that a lot of the Shemitic Negroes that migrated to Africa, West Africa mostly, some of them came back. Not all of them. They came back in three different groups. Some under the leadership of Ezra, Zerubbabel, and Nehemiah. And for years, many of us have been led to believe that these people were of a different coloration. But the Bible wants you to know that's not so. And some will hear this and will read the transcript of this affidavit today, and they will say to you, color doesn't matter. And perhaps I would say to them, okay, color doesn't matter, but truth matters. Truth matters. And if truth matters, then come with me to Revelation chapter 1. Revelation chapter 1. And let us just reason together. Revelation chapter 1, we know this. Yohanan is on the island of Patmos. He's banished there because of his faith. And while there, he said, in Yah's day, he had a vision. He had a vision. And what all that John saw, the whole book of Revelation. Now we have to understand something else. Yah says, well, Yohanan says that this testimony that he received from Yeshua was given to Yeshua by his father, who gave it to Yeshua, who gave it to the angel, and the angel brought it to John. And he says he was in the spirit on Yah's day. Now, some have conjectured and say this is Sunday, some say it is Sabbath. We need to understand that Yah's day is the whole millennium period of 1,000 years. That's the day. Because 2 Peter 3 and verse 8 says, 1,000 years is one day in celestial time. We need to understand that. So when John says, I was in the spirit and the Yah's day, he's saying the whole of Revelation was unfolded to me, and I saw everything that will happen from here on until the end of time. That's what he wants you to know. But the point I really, really want you to grasp is verse 12 reading on. Because someone is speaking to John here. Perhaps I should say Yohanan, because John is English. Because as you well know, 500 years ago, there was no J in the alphabet. And so this is why we ought to refrain from the idea of saying Jesus. His name is Yeshua. His father's name, under which he came, is Yah. And Shua means salvation. So Yah is salvation. That's his name. John, however, did I say John? I meant Yohanan. And I turned to see the voice that spoke with me, and being turned, I saw 7 golden candlesticks. And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one unto the Son of Man, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed in garment down to his foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle. His head and his ears were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire, and his feet like unto fine brass, as if it was burned in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters. So John said, and remember, John was told, write down all that you have seen. And John, when you write it down, take it to the 7 assemblies, meaning take it to all the assemblies that represent different eras of time and the different spiritual condition of the assemblies throughout the ages. Do that, John. So John took it to Ephesus, to Smyrna, to Pergamum, to Thyatira, to Sardis, to Philadelphia, and now to Laodicea, the era in which we live and worshiping. But it seemed to me that Laodicea is more deceived than everybody else, because Laodicea doesn't even know what its Messiah looks like. But John here is letting us know that the Messiah, his feet was like burnished brass. You can't even say that he was light-skinned. It says burnished brass. And while I might agree with you that color doesn't matter, it's righteousness, truth does matter. And we can't add to it. And moreover, he said his hair was like wool. So the Negroes, the Shemitic Negroes, the descendants of Shem, who Shem was the Melchizedek that we read of in chapter 14 of Genesis, who met Abraham and blessed Abraham. We need to understand we are now under the Shemitic order, the Shemitic administration that comes under the rule or the kingdom of Melchizedek. We need to understand that. So we have a problem because you have one group of people over here saying they are Jews and they get a lot of support, political and otherwise, from a certain group of people. And you have another group of people claiming that they are the Jews. Now, for those looking on who don't know where they fit into the scheme of things, they're lost. And some may find it very difficult to believe either of them. We do know historically that many of the people who migrated during the time of Yeshua, they went to West Africa. They don't always want you to know this fact, Because if the world is to know who really we are, then you would see clearly that and as the word said that we read earlier in Sophanos, that we are the dispersed people. We are the ones walking on foot like David. And those who were supposed to be servants are now riding on horsebacks. They are the rulers. That's what the word says. But remember, though, that even though David was running and hiding on Mount Zion barefoot, Yah did restore him. It's promised to us because we're from the same tribe of David. Now, so when we examine ourselves and we look at, even in America here today, we see a number of our people have migrated intellectually and religiously into the religion of Mohammed. But the word says, our religion is of Judah. We are from the tribe of Judah. That's what the word is saying. And so Yeshua has something to say about this because we need a greater authority to authenticate who is telling the truth. Remember, it's an affidavit. And an affidavit is presented to the court, and the court has to ratify that what has been said is true. So come with me to Revelation chapter 2 and verse 9. He says, I know thy works and tribulation. Hear me. I know your slavery. And I know what you're going through or have been through. And though they have removed the chains from your feet, those chains have been put on your mind. I know that. But thou art rich. This morning we in Sabbath school, we talked about rich man, poor man. And he's letting you know, in spite of the fact that you were lynched and you were pulled behind pickups and you couldn't drink from the same faucets as other people, you had to sit on the back seat of the bus. And when another person come in that didn't look like you, you had to give up your seat. It says you're rich. That's what he said. And I know that thou art slandered. I know that they said Negroes, nigger. I know all that. And some say they're Jews. Shall I read it again? Let's read it again. I know thy works and tribulation and the poverty. Despite the fact that Yah is saying, I've put so much resources in Africa, under the ground, oil, gold, diamond. Those from the West, the merchant, they have come and they have taken that out and brought it to their own country, refined it, and then sell it back to you. I know your poverty, but I know your richness. I know it. You can see the irony here. He's saying everything that you need is under the earth. I put it in the soil, but you just don't seem to get it together. All 54 countries that are in the continent, you don't get it together. And everybody, like marauding thieves, just come and take it out. I know your tribulation. I know it. But you're rich. You're rich. I know thou art slandered by them which say they are Jews. Did you hear that? He's saying, These are some of the same merchants who bought you from the Hamitic people in Africa and from the Ishmaelite tribes. Who did they sell Joseph to? Ishmaelites. Did they not? To the Ishmaelites. Same tribes we are again being sold to. But he says, they claim to be Jews, but they're not. They are the synagogue of Satan. That's what he says. Who is the same people who slandered you, the same people who sold you. I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them to come and worship before thy feet, and to know that I have loved thee. Because what? Thou art kept the word of my patience. I also will keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the world to try them that dwell upon the earth. Behold, I come quickly. Hold what? That fast which thou hast, and no man shall take your crown. He said, you're walking on barefoot now and you're running. But those who are on the horses, they will come and worship before you, and you will get your crown back. Just like Mordecai, you will get your crown back. All you have to do, don't bow to them, even as Mordecai did not bow to Haman. They will put legislation in place like Haman to get rid of you. They will do that. But don't bow to them. Because somehow, he's saying, one night I will make sure that the king doesn't go to sleep. Are you with me? Because he that keepeth Israel, he neither slumber nor sleep, and he's looking in the records of heaven, and he knows that we have not been given pay for the work that we have done. We've built their penitentiaries, we have built their schools, and all that they have done. Instead of putting us on horseback, they have treated us like mules. Isn't that the truth? That's the affidavit. That's the truth of the word. And so you ask yourself the question, because you're still pondering, why could this be so? It doesn't make sense to you that you who are walking on barefoot are claiming to be the true princes and the true heir. How could that be? And those who you claim to be the servant are riding on horseback. It doesn't make sense. You better come with me to Genesis, and you're going to turn your pages to chapter 9. Chapter 9 of Genesis, and we will fleetingly look at verse 27. Elohim, that's Yahweh, shall persuade Japheth. He shall persuade who? Japheth, that he may dwell in the tents of Shem. Did you get that? He will, for a while, let Japheth, the Gentiles, dwell in the house of the Shemitic Negroes. Are you with me? That's what the word says. And the Canaan shall be a servant unto his brethren. But you know what they've done? They've twisted the word. And they have said, because Canaan is a son of Ham, when Canaan was cursed because Ham saw his father's nakedness, then all of us was cursed. No, he says Canaan. Ham had 4 sons. Canaan. Not Put, not Cush, not Mizraim, Canaan. And so they look at this word, they look at the composite affidavit that he had given to his prophets and the apostles. And they thought to themselves, if we could change, and I mean subtly, steal the identity of such people, then we could deceive them. So the man called Michelangelo, he got himself a canvas and some brushes and paint, and he gets to work and he paints a picture that is contrary to the depiction John gave us of the Messiah. Long hair, not woolly hair, fair skin, light skin, white skin, blue eyes. And put this aura around him to make him look Republican and European. And then they sell that to us, many of us, hang that in our churches and in our homes. And underneath, Christ is the unseen guest of this house, the silent listener to every conversation, as if he wasn't listening to them too. That's what they've done and continues to do. But I hear Amos 9 and verse 7. Are you not, O Israel, the same as the Ethiopian? What is he saying? Did I not bless Ephraim and Manasseh and put my name on them? These are North African boys who were born in Egypt. Did I not bless them and put my name Israel on them? And they are from Joseph. Did I not? So, even if you could venture far enough in the wildness of your thinking and think that Joseph was of a different color, we know all the pharaohs at that time were black. All the people were black. And we know that Joseph married a black woman in Egypt. And because we know what Gregor Mendel have said, he alludes to the fact that black skin is dominant and white skin is recessive. You can get the recessive from the dominant, but not the dominant from the recessive. We know all that. So even if Joseph was different and his wife was black, they would have produced Manasseh and Ephraim. They would have come out like you and I, olive skin. And more so, the word would say, because Joseph was a type of Yeshua, he would have burned skin like bronze. That's the word. And this is not being said to stir up anything, but truth matters. Truth matters. It really does matter. And so we really now have to look at Kohelet chapter 4. That's Ecclesiastes chapter 4. So I returned and considered all the oppressions. Did you hear me? Solomon says, so I returned and considered all the oppressions that are done under the sun. None has been done to any other group of people more than ourselves. And behold, the tears of such as were oppressed, and they had no comforter. Did you hear me? We cried out to all the nations, and none came. The 225th grandson of David, of Solomon, that lineage, we call him Haile Selassie. Mussolini decided that he wanted Ethiopia to become a vassal state. And he came to Haile Selassie and said, you better take down that Ethiopian flag and put up the Italian flag and become a vassal state. And like some of our African leaders today, Selassie candidly retorted, saying, I could not cut up my country and give that sugared part to that person or to that country. I would be unworthy of my ancestors, beginning with Solomon. So here, Solomon writes, so I returned and consider all the oppressions that are done under the sun. And behold the tears of such, David said, put my tears in your bottle. The tears of such as were oppressed. And they had no comforter. And on the side of their oppressors, there was power. Did you get me? There was power, but they had no comforter. Wherefore I praise the dead which are already dead more than the living which are yet alive. Yea, better is he than both they which hath not yet been, who hath not seen the evil work that is done under the sun. Who? When you examine the history of England and the history of America, who has not seen it? Who have not read of it? This morning we sang Amazing Grace, how sweet a song that saved a wretch like me. John Newton, the slave captain who transported people to Bristol and to Liverpool, wrote and said, Amazing Grace. But I think that song should have been renamed Amazing Race. How did such a people overcome that ordeal? How were they preserved in such condition? When they were thrown overboard, the sick ones were beaten. They were taken to the markets when they came to American Britain, and the people bid on them as if they were of the lower primates. They bid on them. And at the time they were doing that, the Constitution said we were as equal under the rule of Yah as they were. But now we own them, so they say. But we must go back to the book of Genesis that said, Adam, you must have dominion over the fish and the animal, not over man. But the slavers wanted dominion over us, and so they enslaved our ancestors. And even today, they don't want us to speak. But yet, we live in a free country. Then I must ask myself, if it angered Yah when Miriam spoke evil of Moses' Ethiopian wife, that she broke out into leprosy, if it angered Yah so much, and all she did was speak against Moses' wife, how much more would it anger Yah for the millions of people who are lost in the middle passage, in that ordeal, thrown overboard? You understand why Yah says, the sea will give up the dead. Many of our kinfolk who were thrown overboard, whipped, denied rights, couldn't go to the same school, segregated. Where are you going to get your due reward? Because when Yeshua comes, he's going to segregate the sheep from the goat. Did it not? Says Matthew 25. And you're going to come thinking, oh, I've done well. He said, depart from me, you evildoers. Evildoers. The fool folded his hands together and eated his own flesh. Better is an handful with quietness than both the hands full of travail and vexation of spirit. Did you hear me? Right now, we are told that we live in the greatest nation on earth, the richest nation on earth, but it's full of travail and vexation of spirit. Yeah, I said, you'd be better in a little place that is quiet and you didn't have much. Then I returned and I saw vanity in the sun. It's all vanity. We're chasing money. We're chasing the dollar. We're chasing wealth. It's vanity. There is one alone, and there is not a second. Yeah, he hath neither child nor brother, yet there's no end of all his labor. Did you hear me? He's working, working, working. He has no child. He's supporting nobody. Neither is his eye satisfied with riches. Sounds like the billionaires that we have in America, right? Neither saith he. They have so much, and they keep putting the prices up in the shop, so we can't afford it. This was written years ago. Not satisfied with the riches, neither saith he, for whom do I labor and bereave my soul of good? Who? All the principalities and the municipalities of our land was filled with the slaves. And some wanted to give it up, but not the others. The South says, we want them. We want to keep them under subjection. And so there was a civil war. Well, there is going to be one. Come with me as we close this thing out in the book called Zechariah. Zechariah, and we will meditate on chapter 14. Behold, the day of Yahweh cometh, and the spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee, for I will gather all nations. How many nations? All nations against Jerusalem, to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished, and half of the city shall go forth into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then shall Yahweh go forth and fight against the nation. It's fighting against what? The Gentiles. As when he fought in the day of battle, and his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives. Did you hear that? Now, when we read 2 Thessalonians, or one, I should say, when we read 1 Thessalonians 4, 16 and 17, we have a group of people, or a number of people saying, oh, we will meet him in the air when we go off to heaven. That's our destination. The word says here that his feet will be on the ground. So if he's on the ground, where will you be? Let's read it again so you don't miss it. And his feet shall stand on that day upon the Mount Olives. You had forgotten, didn't you? You had forgotten Acts chapter 1. Hey, you Galatians, right? Is that his end? No. You men from Galilee. So he said, why standest thou gazeth into the heaven? He who you see go up that way, he's coming back. Zechariah said he's here, and you have gone to heaven, and you've missed him. You can give yourself a rapturous applause for nothing. Are you with me? Let's read it again because we want to emphasize this point. Because remember, it's an affidavit, and an affidavit must be true. And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount Olive shall cleave in the midst thereof towards the east and towards the west. And there shall be a great valley, and half of the mountain shall be removed towards the north, and half of it towards the south. And he shall flee to the valley of the mountain, for the valley of the mountain shall reach unto Azal. Yea, he shall flee like as he fled before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. And Yahweh, my Elohim, shall come, and all the saints with him. Did you hear me? You missed that. Let's go over it. When you read 1 Thessalonians 4, 16 and 17, you say, we meet him in the air and we go off to heaven. Zechariah said, his feet is on the ground. And he said, he comes with what? His saints. Isn't that what he said? He said he comes with his saints. And Yahweh, my Elohim, shall come, and all his saints with him. You can't miss that. You can't confuse that. His feet is on the ground. He's no longer in the air. You only met him in the air, but he comes down now. He has landed. It's like an aircraft. You're circling around the airport trying to land, and now he's given what? Permission to land. That's what the word says. And it shall come to pass in that day that the light shall not be clear in some places and dark in other places of the world. But it shall be one day which shall be known to Yahweh, not today nor night, not day or night, but it shall come to pass that at evening time it shall be light. And it shall be in the day that living waters shall go out from Jerusalem, half of them towards the eastern, and half of them towards the western sea. In the summer and in the winter shall it be. And Yahweh shall be king over what? The earth. And in that day, Yahweh will prove to be a unity. That's the piece we talked about this morning. And with one name. What name? He's coming to reign. So next time you read Thessalonians 4, 1 Thessalonians, you better read it in context of Zechariah. He says his feet on the ground and he's coming to reign, and he has all the saints with him. So as we looked at the affidavit, we recognize that the Africans and the Arabs sold the Hebrew Negroes. We concluded that. And they sold them to the Europeans. The Shemitic Negroes are not Africans. Understand that. Ham is the ancestral father of the Alkebulans, not the Negroes. Shem is the father of the Israelite Negroes. Are you with me? And perhaps I ought to share this with you. You probably already know it, but the Zondervan's Bible Dictionary, Zondervan's Bible Dictionary wants you to know that Ham, the youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood, and one of 8 persons to live through the flood, he became the progenitor father of the dark races, not the Negroes, but the Egyptian, Ethiopian, Libyans, and Canaanite. Not the Negroes. The Negroes are Shemites. But they wanted us to believe that the people of Judah were different coloration from the Africans. No. Some are from Shem and some are from Ham. And the Ashkenazi, many of them, Moses says, they are Gentiles, but they're dwelling in Shem's tent. And Yahweh said, I'm going to come and I'm going to fight, because it has to be until the time of the Gentiles are fulfilled. And the time of the Gentile stretches all the way from the time of Nebuchadnezzar until the Antichrist comes, or the anti-Messiah comes. So let us understand, the next time we read and study the history of our people, we understand it within the context of what Yah has said in the scriptures, not the 17th and 18th century writers in terms of how they perceive it. Because we are, the word says, the dispersed of Yah. In Yeshua's name I pray. Amen.